What's good, beautiful people? Welcome back to the DenofTruth. It's your boy Tina. So today we got a very multifaceted person. Someone who I've heard a lot of great things about the work that they've been doing. A lot of great things about how they've been helping to build a community and bring inspiring young people together. And that's extremely important. Creating a community, especially in the time that we're in. So today I got Yasmin. Yasmin, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. So look, Yasmin, I want you to give the people a little bit of a backdrop of who you are and what you do.
I'm a photographer and I run Culture Machine, which is a production company, and a studio now as well, Culture Machine Studios in Marrickville. And essentially, I play a few different roles. Primarily, I photograph fashion, but alongside that, I suppose I operate as a producer of sorts, and I basically curate teams and connect them with clients. So I'll get a contract from a client and they will give me the whole project, and then that will involve talent, creative direction, photography, video, editing, all of that, and I'll manage all of that under Culture Machine. So the aim of Culture Machine and my vision right from the beginning, I started it 7 years ago, straight out of uni, was to try and get my friends employed and try and make an industry that seemed really esoteric and perhaps maybe run a bit on nepotism, to try and sort of dismantle those structures and allow spaces for people who I thought needed a voice and who I thought were really talented and maybe were being overlooked. So that was the whole manifesto.
Well, that's a great description of it because, even one thing that I've noticed, especially looking at Culture Machine, because I did a lot of research coming into this. I'm not sure, a lot of people call it stalking or whatever, but I was looking. I did a lot of. I was really looking at a lot of things like Culture Machine. A lot of work and project that you've been a part of, and one thing that I really noticed, and one thing that was a big part of it. One thing that I rated as well was the big sense of community, because you probably know yourself, whether you're a photographer, videographer, or whatever you do, one of the hardest things to do is to find a space. Yeah. Like just a space period, right? And finding a space where people will allow you to, be creative and do the work that you want to do, that in itself is extremely valuable. Yeah. So is that something that you really were trying to get across when you started creating Culture Machine, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a physical space, which came later on, so I've had the space for a year, but a metaphorical space, definitely. Yeah. I think as a young female photographer and adapting from living in Bali and the kind of world that I lived in there, which was in a lot of ways very inclusive. I went to school with lots of expat kids from around the world as well as local kids. And I think when I came to Australia, I was 8. I was born here, but we officially moved here when I was 8. Sort of adapting to feeling different and finding a space of belonging. I think a lot of it, so when I mean a metaphorical space, that's feeling like you belong, feeling like you're represented in some way. So I think in the early days, my motivation was to find a metaphorical space of belonging, which then manifested itself into a physical space where I could be like, hey, these doors are open to anybody that wants to create. And so moving into the studio space, which I've had for a year now, basically I was just really over, going to these studios and being on these productions where I was just looked down on, whether it's because I'm a woman or whether it's because I'm young or whatever. It just was kind of and maybe because I didn't necessarily have traditional training. I did a Bachelor of Arts in Communication and I studied media arts and production and filmmaking, but I didn't study the technical side of photography. So I just kind of felt a bit dismissed. And I was just kind of but why? Why is it this weird environment where you walk into a studio and you ask about a piece of equipment that, why don't you know that? So it's a quarter stop this, then that. It's just just explain it to me in in lay terms.
Let me know the information.
If you know what it is and you can pass that knowledge on to me, then great. Because I was always told, a very intelligent person is someone who can explain a complex concept in really simple terms. And I was just frustrated. I'm I'm here and I'm ready to learn and you're just putting me down for not knowing. I'm here to learn. And I always found that as well, interning or assisting, just this weird hierarchy and making you feel you don't belong here, but it's just I'm here to learn. Exactly. So basically I was how do I create a space where I'm so honest about I don't know what I'm doing with studio gear. I'm gonna buy a bunch of lights, invest in this, and I'm gonna learn just as you learn. Yeah. So basically, open a space and was I'm a photographer who's come this far in my career using natural light. and shooting on film, wanting to learn how to, shoot in a studio and use strobes and all this sort of stuff. And I'm going to invest in the equipment, invest in the space, and at the same time share that space with all the other photographers I know. And I found that they were all the same. They were like, oh, I'm really nervous. Like, I've always wanted to work in a studio, but I just felt like it was out of reach. Either it was too expensive or I just didn't feel like I was welcome and all this sort of stuff. So, yes, I really wanted a physical space where people felt like they could come in and use all the gear and do whatever they needed to do. And there's no mistakes. I just wanted to create that kind of environment.
But, I get that. I always get that sense from, even when I started the podcast, just asking people about certain things. Like, for example, like this mic in general. I remember I had asked someone, I just DM'd someone and I knew they worked within sound. I asked, what sound, what sort of equipment should I get? And they messaged me back saying, oh, don't you know the different types of microphones and the different types of variations of, I'm like, no, I don't know, bro. Yeah. But if you want to tell me, and like, what I mean? And I'm asking you, you know what I mean? And even like the whole podcast, my whole thing was try to get in people, like yourself who, one, have the access to the information and have done the time and get them in to sort of explain certain concepts. Because, with all the time that you've had with this experience, someone's going to watch this and gain 8-10 years of experience in about an hour. And that's so important, man. And I get that vibe from a lot of people, even when I watch the work that you're doing and the different types of people you're working with. It's like every single shoot is someone different, or you're encompassing different types of concepts, which is really dope. But what were some of the learning lessons that you had early within Culture Machine? Because now it's so big, right? You got different aspects within the one concept. But what were some of the early learning experiences that you've experienced?
So many early learning experiences and constantly learning as well. You never stop learning. So like I said, I was at uni. I was at UTS doing media arts and production, graduated at 21 and was like, I want to start a production company. So I just registered the name Culture Machine and kind of went from there. So I guess like the early learning lessons were business. How do you start a business? These are also things that are just so like out of reach. And I often think like, why don't they teach us this shit at school? Like, why didn't they teach me taxes and teach me accounting and all of that? It's like the basics. How
to get an ABN, like basic shit, like
what is an ABN? What's an ACN? Like when can you charge GST? When can you not? Like all those sorts of things. So I guess like in the early days, it was very practical learning things. And I'm really glad that I went to the extent of trolling is the wrong word. Trolling. Not trolling. Trolling the internet for as much information as I could about how to create really solid foundations for a company, because I was looking really to the future and I was like, you really have to have solid foundations so that you don't disable, like dismantle. Wow, words today.
Yeah.
Dismantle.
Dismantle, yeah.
So those are the early lessons. And then the next biggest lesson was working with people. So I think a lot of collaboration and your ability to collaborate with other people, especially other people who do the same thing as what you do, is this maturity that you have to come into where you need to have a certain level of confidence in who you are and what you're trying to say, that sharing information with people is not a threat. So I think as a young photographer, like I said, I was so eager to learn and I just wanted to ask all of the questions. Now that I maybe have a lot more knowledge than I did then, when people ask me questions, I want to be able to willingly and openly say, this is exactly the gear I use, this is how I grade, this is how I do this, without feeling threatened by that person. Yeah. So I guess that's the biggest learning experience and an ongoing experience as a person as well as an artist, being able to share and being open, but also having a confidence in yourself and being like, you can hire all of the same gear as me, but you're not going to shoot the same thing as me.
Exactly.
And so that comes with managing ego, that comes with discovering really who you are as an artist. And I think it says more about you than it does about other people, if that makes sense. Like, if I'm threatened and jealous by other people, it says a lot more about me than it does about them. So that's kind of allowed me to get to where I am now at 28, where I'm inviting what you would call my competitors into my space and being like, go for gold. I respect you. I really like your work. And I want you to have a go at the same equipment that I use. And it's not a threat to me. It's actually... It's really a strong thing to do.
It's a confidence thing, and I think that's been sort of my theme word for this year is my ego. You know what I mean? Because I'm not even gonna lie. I think even coming on to about 2 years now, I was someone who I felt as if my ego, in my mind, it made me think about certain things in a particular way, but really wasn't like that. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think it's very interesting. I got energy healing the other night.
Okay,
and
so explain what energy healing is. 'Cause that sounds lit.
Let me just take you right off into this other
let's just go.
tangent.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah.
I'll circle it back. So growing up in Bali, my dad's Balinese. Balinese people are very spiritual, and my dad's side is Hindu, my mum's side is Greek Orthodox. So
Damn.
I grew up in between the very, very different worlds, but also not identifying with any of it really. And then going to like a Catholic all-girls school and being like, wow, okay.
What's going on here? yeah.
But I think, I suppose I distinguish religion from spirituality, and I would say that I'm a spiritual person, but not religious. Anyway, so my early years are exposed to things like Reiki, which is it's a type of energy healing where they don't touch you and it's just all energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Long story short, I randomly met this lady who then introduced me to this other lady via text, and she was like, we need to release, your chakras are blocked. We need to release them. Yeah. This lady will help you do it. So I just I texted her before, like as COVID happened, and she's like, look, I can't see anyone at the moment. Texted her the other night and went to her place. She operates from her home. It's a studio apartment, and I just like get on a massage bed and she sort of starts the energy healing. Yeah. So this one was slightly different because it was massage energy healing. So she did actually touch. Anyway, part of what she said to me was, you have very strong ethics and morals, but this blockage that you're feeling, because I find it hard to breathe a lot, like it's just like an anxiety thing, and I just like, why can't I breathe?
Yeah. And then the kids get,
it's excitement as well as anxiety. Anyway, she was like, the source of this problem comes from the fact that you have really strong morals and ethics, but you're trying so hard to fit yourself into this fake system. And you feel really fake. You're not a fake person, but you feel fake forcing yourself into this system.
Yeah.
So I think circling back to like what she said about this fake system, I think that's where a lot of this comes from. Like it's healthy to have an ego. Everybody has an ego. Yeah. And it's managing that ego. And I think we're tricked into believing that this is a competition, that life is a competition, and you've got to stay up with everybody else, and you've got to watch everyone on Instagram and be making the same content as, that sort of thing. Which isn't the case. And I think COVID has really thrown that into perspective for a lot of us. Yeah. It's not a race. Creativity, art, human beings, growth, it's not a race. And I think the sooner we come to terms with that, the sooner we become able to manage our egos in a healthy way. So,
and I feel that as well, especially the whole thing with like being a person of strong ethics and morals, especially when you're a person of strong ethics and morals, and then you have to get into, for example, whether that be an industry or you're doing something, and those strong ethics and morals are tested, you know what I mean? And, and I think, like that's really when you discover what type of person you are. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it's easy for me to say, oh, I'm a strong person with ethics and morals, and then I have an opportunity in front of me, and I know that is against what I believe, and I have a choice right now. Yeah. So that being said, how do you? Because one thing that I've noticed about you is that you're very you're art first. So you love what you do. Your passion is your most important thing. Yeah. So how do you manage art? I guess art versus the business side of things.
Yeah, I think I'm very interested in innovation more than anything. So I think that's where the art side of it comes from. And the reason why I'm so excited by young artists is because they're the ones who are really experimenting. They're the ones that are pushing the boundaries, and they're the ones that maybe, like you said, they're doing it because they love it. Yeah. And that keeps me really inspired. So I'm constantly surrounding myself with the next up-and-coming whoever it is. Yeah. I'm constantly on the search for people that are doing things that are really exciting. And like when, COVID happened and we all went into lockdown, I started an IGTV series where I asked people to submit the work that they were doing in isolation, jumped on these calls with them and interviewed them. And it was so fascinating because I was virtually meeting all of these people who were telling me stories about how they were working within these new parameters that they've been given. So I think that is my motivation, or anyway, like I'm just interested in people and how they innovate and how they use like what's around them and how they try to tell stories. So I would say that I start with that sort of stuff, and then my business mind kicks in and goes, how can I monetize this for you?
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that's just how it is.
How your
for
mind
me.
thinks. Yeah, most definitely.
I think because I had to be really proactive right from the beginning. So when I was 21 and I started my business, it was like, I'm a photographer, but I'm not the most experienced photographer and I'm not the best photographer. So how can I secure jobs? And I can do that with the strength of a team.
Yeah.
Instead of me just being, Yasmin Suteja photography, I was like, now I could be a team and I could offer a whole package.
Yeah.
So that's where this kind of train of thought started for me, which I've carried on into sort of the structure of my business, which is just like, first we'll start with experimenting. First we'll start with a test shoot. We'll start with an editorial. We'll start with a proof of concept. We'll hire some gear. We'll go out. We'll shoot something. We'll create that product, and then I'll basically use that as like, proof of concept or like a spec ad. Contact a client that I think it sort of aligns with and basically try and sell them the idea. And then if I sell them the idea, then I bring that team on with me. So yes, it is art first because I'm like, let's make something and then let's show them. Because I was also told when it comes to getting clients, show, don't tell. I could go in and speak and email as much as I want, but they need to see what we can do.
They need to see the proof of concept.
They need to see the proof of concept. And a lot of times that means, free time and investing your own money into making something that you really care about. And that allows you room to experiment without having a client. Then basically the next step is selling them that and saying, this is what you want.
And
here's something we prepared earlier.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was watching. I was watching this podcast, and this guy was basically talking about how he came from prison, and his cousin was a rapper, and he was a very established rapper. And basically what he was talking about was, I couldn't go to my cousin and be like, listen, I can make music, I can do all of this, because I haven't done the groundwork. What are you going to do how are you going to explain your concept to someone when you haven't even done the groundwork? For example, all right, I want to create a podcast. All right, cool. Have you invested in any technology? No, I haven't. What's the name of your podcast? I don't have a name of a podcast. What are you going to talk about? I don't have a podcast. So now you're going to someone else and they are fleshing out your concept for you.
Totally.
So how are you meeting that person 50-50?
Exactly.
So I definitely understand what you mean about actually investing and just doing your own thing, and eventually clients and people will eventually start coming out to you.
Yeah.
So look, I want to get into more what you were talking about COVID, because we were talking about this before we started recording. So we've got the video, but we don't have the audio.
It was very passionate when I first
passionate.
came in.
We just went into it. So I think you've, especially, with what you do, I think you've been sort of at the forefront of COVID. I think maybe the hospitality industry and the arts industry have really felt, as much as everyone has felt it, but more so those two industries in regards to the work and then all the limitations now.
Totally.
Even coming out of, even post-COVID, there's going to be so many limitations for artists in different fields. So what have you noticed, and what do you think has been the biggest impact from COVID and this time?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I was watching the news and I was seeing a lot of the information coming from Europe. My brother's girlfriend was staying with me at the time and her family was in Paris. So we were getting, direct information about how heavy it was there. And I think Australia and the media wasn't really talking about it in the same way at that time, but I was hearing all this stuff about her brother actually tested positive for it and she was kind of going through that process of him being in quarantine, etc. So I started hearing about it early and it started kind of worrying me. I was about to go into shooting a music video. So we'd spent a month in pre-production. I was directing the music video. It was for an Australian artist. We'd done all our location recce's. We'd hired all the gear. We'd bought all the props. We were about a week out of shooting, and the first weekend we'd planned to shoot, but it rained, so we had to push it out. Then that was when COVID and the restrictions were really starting to set in, and I had to make a really big decision as the director of my company and as the person responsible, I suppose, for everybody on set to cancel it and to refund them, which was a really hard decision to make.
It's a big decision.
It was super hard because, half of me was like, just push through. No one's going to know. It's early days. What's the likelihood that the authorities are going to come and shut you down? But what was motivating the decision more than the kind of the fine that we would get was the responsibility of maybe, putting people's health in danger. Because at that time, it really was that really fearful thing. We were shooting on a property that was owned by an elderly man. And I was like, what do we do?
Those people in the risk.
30 young people, etc. And this is when we were really saying, COVID's just an old people's disease, which then we realized was very problematic. So I had to make the decision to can that. And that was the first real big blow, especially also having to refund the money. Like, obviously, it had already gone into gear and stuff, but I lost out on, like, props and things. But it is what it is. And that's sort of what I deal with running a production company. A lot of the time you are out of pocket trying to make shit happen. So that happened. And then I'd had three international jobs lined up. So I had one in London and then I had one in New Zealand. And then I think we were talking about another one as well in the States. And anyway, 2 of them got cancelled. And then Billabong was flying over to Byron and I was supposed to shoot that. That got cancelled. Then I started really worrying because I was like, all right, I work project to project, contract to contract, invoice to invoice. And I also pay, pretty high levies for my studio rent as well as my home rent as well as all of the other things that I pay for. And, the government hadn't really talked about any support at this point
yet. Smaller businesses.
For smaller businesses. And I think, it's fine to say save for a rainy day, but when you're trying to run a business off your own back, you don't have any savings. You're just going, especially when you work essentially freelance. I'm, like I said, contract to contract. So that was very scary financially. And, I had to speak to my landlord and I had to decide whether or not to keep the lease. And there was a real point there where I was like, shit, I'm going to have to move out and sell all my stuff, and this is the end, which was really, really sad. My studio manager, who I work with really closely, she's really lovely. I had to, have the chat with her as well, which was like, I'm going to have to not be hiring you. And she's just like, that's like, I get it. Everyone's losing their jobs. But I also just don't know when it's going to go back to normal or when I'm going to be able to employ you again. So those kinds of things, really, really hard shit that deals with finance, people's emotions, established relationships, and this thing that I've been building for the last 7 years where I really felt like I was just getting some momentum. Yeah. And then it just comes to a halt. But again, also being very understanding of the privileged position that I am in comparison to a lot of other people. So when it all happened, I just kind of went, what do I do? The last thing I want to do right now is sell people a product, because the only sort of work that was coming to me was influencer type work where it was like, hey, Yasmin, do you want to put this up? And I was just like, that feels gross for me to do.
Yeah, at least you're honest. I like how you're honest about that, man.
It did.
Gross.
It felt really gross. And I was just like, at this point in time when people can't pay their rent or buy their groceries, why am I trying to sell them this product anyway? So I said no to a lot of those things. And I had, moments where I was like, I might just go completely offline. So I deactivated my Instagram. It only lasted 10 hours. But 10
hours is a lot. You made the decision.
I made a big stand against, I suppose myself in a way. And I went through this real existential crisis. What am I even doing with my life? I live on this really superficial world where all I do is take photos of products and sell products. And I was really beating myself up a lot. Because I was reducing what I do to a very surface level thing. Because obviously, in the face of a pandemic where people are losing their lives and the only essential workers are people in grocery stores and people in hospitals, you start to go, what am I contributing to the world?
Yeah. Is it really important? Is it really important what I'm doing? Yeah.
Right. So had all those kinds of thoughts. Then I thought, well, when it comes down to everything, Yasmin, what do you love to do and what motivates you? And what motivates me is people, conversations. And I thought, the only way to get myself out of this hole is to talk to other people and find commonalities in our experience. So I decided to start the ISO project, which was where I put a call out for artists that were making, art in isolation. And I put together this PDF brief, which essentially asked them to do a selfie, your own version of a selfie. And I'm like, bend the rules. I'm not talking mirror selfie. I'm like a reflection of yourself in whatever medium it is that you use. So we had musicians and painters and mixed media artists and all these people. And it was really beautiful seeing my emails flooded, not with, do you want to promote this product, but hey, Yasmin, here's this artwork that I've been working on. I'd love you to look at it. And then I asked them to support that with footage of them actually making it. Yeah. So it was this quite detailed PDF, which I was stoked everyone followed, which was film yourself doing things. And so Keelan, who was the musician that submitted, I actually reached out to him because I think he's amazing. And he was like, it's really weird for me to film myself making beats because it's a really monotonous, boring process. And he sort of had to have his phone up while he's like, I'm so bored.
People just looking at the screen like this.
But I was like, people are really interested in having an insight into what that's like. And I'm sure there's a bunch of, maybe up and coming people that want to be producers and whatever that would love to see a little bit of insight into the software that you're using and what it's like making beats and how you work from home and all that sort of stuff. Started this series and then complemented the work that they were providing me with an interview over House Party because
House Party, yeah.
I was like, because House Party has like the perfect squares, but then everyone was like, oh, you know, you get hacked on it. So
you do. You actually do. If you don't put it on private, people start joining. People start joining the conversation.
If you don't lock your room, they join. But then apparently they were doing like some phishing scam or some shit. But I was like, anyway, get on House Party.
Yeah.
That is not a promotion for House Party also.
No promo.
Wasn't paid to say that.
Promo.
Anyway, so doing these interviews with them and cutting them together into episodes. And I was getting so much out of these conversations, hearing everyone's unique story. And what was quite interesting as well was all of these artists had to turn back to art when what they saw as their, you know, stable job was the first thing taken away from them. Yeah. So like Keelan, for example, was surviving off of his cafe job, which to him was, you know, the stable job. And then when that was taken away, it's, well, all I've got left is music. And I love music. Yeah. So it's sort of in a weird way, like in the same way that you were saying for me that art is priority for me and business is secondary. COVID kind of made that a thing too.
And that's what I've been telling people. I've been telling people one of the benefits, if you can take something out of COVID, one of the benefits is that I feel like a lot of artists right now are being forced to, well, it's really being forced to really pattern whatever they're doing correctly. They've really been forced to really think about, you know, the type of work that they've been doing, how much they actually love doing what you do. Because when you put in a situation where it's like either you're not working or, you know, you don't have a job and this is your only thing that you see as a source of income or it's the only thing that you really need to do, there's a different level of, I guess, mentality in the way that you see it. So I think, you know, post-COVID, when things get back to normal, I think it's going to be a good thing because a lot more people are going to be a lot more focused on what they're doing. But even that about COVID, man, I know it's been crazy. I know obviously there's been a lot of negativity about that, but I've seen a lot of great things starting to come from it. You know what I mean? Yeah. What have you noticed? What sort of things have you been saying that's been interesting you?
Yeah, well, so like we were saying, I think what I've noticed is people who have the ability to tell stories and people who kind of understand the community that they belong to or that they want to speak to and they understand their audience and that have some intention. I think so many of us were becoming too comfortable with how easy it is to make content. And I've said this before, like the internet, the internet for me is fascinating because it democratized knowledge. So I remember being in high school and that was the beginnings of YouTube where I knew that I could Google or YouTube anything and I could teach myself how to do it. And then fast forward into 2020, you can teach yourself how to do anything. Podcast, you know, make a show, do an IGTV series. Literally anything you can learn online. So I think the problem with that was it became very noisy. A lot of people were just making a lot of shit. And then Instagram became this thing where, you know, prime time and the algorithm and you've got to keep posting.
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad, you know, I'm just going to cut you off. I'm glad that you said that because I've been so anti that, you know, a lot of people are like, you know, oh, I'm going to post something at 6 p.m. because I know there's going to be so many people on Instagram. It might get on the discovery page. It's like, no, it doesn't matter when you post something as long as your content is good and your story and you're telling your story and people can relate to that story. You know, a lot of it has been based, I think a lot of art has been based around this whole clout thing, this whole like, you know, or this is getting, and you probably know this more than anyone, just like your likes, your retweets, your views is not a reflection of how good your art is. No. You know? And I think a lot of people were really stuck in that mentality that, okay, I've got to get this many views. I've got to get this much likes for my art to be credible. But it's like, no, not necessarily. If the right people are looking at what you're looking at, you're creating, and the people who you want to inspire are being inspired, that's all that matters. Yeah. You know, and in the long term, you're definitely going to have a longevity because what you're doing is not for attention. It's because
there's integrity in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think with this whole, you know, this thirst for likes and this thirst for recognition and retweets and all that sort of stuff, I found myself getting stuck in that mentality for sure. Like I could check myself into, I was analyzing what kind of photo I would put up or what kind of video I would put up, knowing what people wanted. This was going to perform really well. This isn't going to perform really well. This video that I feel so strongly about, that's an interview with, an up-and-coming artist, I feel so strongly about, but I just know it's not going to get the likes. It's not going to get the views. Whereas, you know, me putting up a selfie or whatever is going to get more likes and views because that's just how people's brains work. It's like we just want to like double tap something that's aesthetically pleasing or whatever, or that maybe gives you an insight into this person that you follow and
this is life
their
and
life.
So forth.
And so when I so happened, like I said, I felt gross about promoting myself. Even putting up a selfie for me, unless it was, really artistically kind of pushing myself out of my comfort zone. An iPhone selfie to me just wasn't something I wanted to make, or that I thought, I just thought it was a bit insensitive for me to be putting that content out.
Yeah.
Basically, I said to myself, either don't say anything at all and get completely offline, or do something for your community, because this is the time to think about community. So that's why I started the series. And I knew that these videos weren't going to get the views and the traction that I normally get, but I knew I cared so much more about them than if I'd forced myself into making that sort of standard sort of content that you can test that's going to do well. So yes, what I've seen that I've been really impressed by is there's been a massive shift in the type of content that we're seeing online, because I think people have become a little more fearless, because basically it's like the Bakhtinian Carnivalesque, which is like the carnival for the day, and everything's flipped on its head and everything's suspended. Yep. So the rules are suspended. And it happens like in Shakespeare a lot. And basically it's just kind of like, if you take all the rules away, people can do whatever the fuck they want. Yeah. And I noticed that people were starting to get that energy and be like, oh, likes and stuff don't matter anymore. So I'm going to put up this film that I just made, or I'm going to, and I'm seeing
I'm going to try it.
There's no rules. No one's going to judge me. And like I was saying, people innovating with like FaceTime shoots and doing shit that's like, all right, well, if I can't physically be with people, what can I do? So I'm excited by the suspension of the rules per se, and what that's given people in terms of like a certain freedom of expression is what I've observed out of COVID.
And you know what? I watched the ISO 2020. I was watching the Instagram, and one thing that I like from it is just your storytelling, man. I think that's the most important thing, man. Yeah. You're giving people the platform for them to be able to speak. One, they can talk about, for example, their process, and yes. I think that's extremely valuable. For example, I'm not sure her name, but she was the illustrator.
Bianca,
yeah. So look, with people, a lot of people, they want to be illustrators, but they literally have no idea how to start. They don't know the equipment. They don't know the type of the structure that maybe you should be following when you first start the information. So when people are watching that, and then you probably don't notice it because you're doing it. And I understand sometimes when you're doing something, you don't understand the impact. But a lot of people are watching that and they're really getting a lot of inspiration because one, they got time to really sit down and really listen to and intake a lot of information and really work on what they're doing. But also it's like, it just creates a sense of a community, and I think that's the most important thing. People coming together in this period of time. Because I'm the same as you. I was like, and I've noticed it a lot. It's like right now, it's not really the time to be forcing shit down people's throats.
No,
it really isn't the time. It's not the energy to do it. Maybe in the next couple of months, then you can start doing what you got to do, and you can start, really forcing it out. But right now, it's really the time to work with the people around you, give them a platform, start discussing how everyone can improve what they're doing.
Totally.
Fuck the rules.
Yeah.
Right? Just even if you want to say fuck the rules for 3 months, just do what you need to do for you to sort of take it to the next level when things get back to normality. Yeah. And even I think one of the things that you were talking about is just, and also that I read was being flexible with your art, right? And we were talking about how, I think you were talking about how, people are saying that FaceTime shoot is not really a shoot. Yeah. You know what I mean? And my whole thing is that, so what else are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
If you're stuck at home, would you rather just be stuck on your bed watching TV or...
Do you know what really bothers me? People who go out of their way to put other people down for trying. Yeah. And it frustrates the shit out of me because I'm just like, that's creativity. Let people try. What is wrong with trying? And, growing up, I think I have to say it was one of the main things I realized about Australia when I moved here. It was like, I was such a excited and motivated child, and you could call me a bit of an overachiever because you'd give me a project and I'd go above and beyond to do it, and it wasn't well received by other kids, by parents, and that was taken into my adult life too, where even in the fashion industry, the way that I've done things so enthusiastically and the way that I've gone, oh, I'm going to knock on your door. If you're not going to open that door for me, I'll just start my own thing.
Yeah.
People don't like that, and it's similar with this whole FaceTime shoot or people trying to innovate during the time of COVID. Let them innovate. Yeah. Why do you have to put them down for that? And so I'm a big advocate of if you want to try something, go for it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, that's fine.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work
cool.
out. But you're probably going to learn something. In fact, I guarantee you're going to learn something. And the rest of us are going to learn something out of it too. So yeah, I was excited by people wanting to innovate, which is why I created ISO 2020. And one of the girls I interviewed actually did do a FaceTime shoot.
Yeah.
And she talked me through the process and it was really fascinating. You know, she was calling up ahead of time and she was planning out the outfits. And there was like a, production, sort of pre-production side of it. And then also just like directing through a screen. And then fast forward to me doing it for Fashion Journal just recently. You know, it's like you can put people down, but you don't know that process. You know, try it yourself.
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
put people down. So it really frustrates me about, you know, maybe Australia, Sydney, or just the creative community. Like, we should all be supporting each other, and we should all be like, I'm excited that you're trying, and I really want to sort of, especially within Culture Machine and whatever I do, I never want to discourage someone from giving something a go.
Yeah, most definitely.
You know, and there's nothing wrong with being a tryhard. I fucking love tryhards.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you. Because even like the same thing with me, because I deal with a lot of musicians and stuff like that, and I always say, man, like, there's nothing wrong with trying. How are you supposed to get to where you want to get to if you're not going to take that shot? You know what I mean? Even if at the end of it, the project comes out and it's not as strong as you want it to be, I guarantee you there's going to be numerous aspects that you learn in that process that the next project you're going to make, you're going to be able to take those aspects, whether that be, for example, maybe it's the visuals or maybe, let's just say it's the engineering or the sonics of the song. You're going to be able to transfer that in a certain way, so you got to try. But even that, I think a lot of stuff comes from insecurity, man. When
for sure.
When people see that, okay, shit, we're not going to let Yasmin in the house, but oh my God, Yasmin created her own thing. So like now anything that Yasmin does is like, oh, it's like this, but it's not. You know what I mean? People, when you're doing your own thing, I feel like
it's threatening.
It's so threatening to people because people see the confidence you got in yourself. When people see the confidence, it's two ways. Like I always say it like, when you're in the room with a bunch of confident people, you're not a confident person, you feel really insecure very quickly.
Totally.
You know what I mean? And I see that sometimes with people, and I notice that like if you're not confident and about what you're doing in front of a room, or if you got 3 or 4 people who are like that, you're insecure very, very quickly. You know, and especially when you're doing your own thing, because one thing that I notice is that a lot of these smaller houses or smaller studios or independent people, they're actually the ones, if you look at what they're doing, they're coming up with most of the innovative stuff that a lot of these bigger studios end up copying.
Exactly.
And I see that. And I see, and now more so because I pay attention to it, you know, whether that be, for example, a radio station, you look at a smaller radio station, it's like, you just completely copy the way they've curated.
You know what? Oh, one of my friends actually sent me a really interesting quote, and I don't know it exactly off by heart, but essentially it was like, if you want to look at where the future's going, you have to look at the pirates. So people like pirate radio.
That's true. Yeah.
And so the people who are this smaller sort of underground community that are maybe controversial or are doing things differently, right now, that's not what's it. But, you know, if you want to forecast the future, you want to be looking at those people. Yeah. And you're very right in saying that a lot of the times the bigger, more established companies or whatever are to some extent stealing ideas from the little companies. And there's, you know, I'm not necessarily mad about that because it's a different structure and a different way of operating, right?
And it's flattering too.
It's flattering, yes. So imitation is the highest form of flattery, but sometimes it's exploitation when they're making heaps of money out there and you're not.
That's true. That's true. That's true too.
But the smaller, nimble, independent agencies have a structure that allows for innovation, that allows for collaboration and allows time to develop these things. Those fast-paced, massive, profit-driven companies, they don't allow for that. It's an environment that doesn't allow for that. So I'm not surprised that they're not necessarily innovating and they're looking to the little guys because it's the structure. So I think what coming back to COVID has done is it's dismantled those kinds of structures that had for decades been operating on a very profit-driven thing where it's just like fast, you know, whatever you need to do, still from the little guys. I mean, I've shot for, you know, some fast fashion brands before where I've walked into their office and there's a corkboard and it's cutouts of every single independent label I know and they're replicating that. Like
that's crazy.
I know people,
crazy,
young designers who've had to, you know, fund their lives by getting a job at one of these fast fashion companies. And you know, to the core of their ethics, it hurts them knowing that they've literally been asked, rip off this label, but do it like this and do it like this, and then we'll mass produce it. But I think that mentality is being dismantled. And I think people's psyche is changing. We're less interested in just crazy consumption. Look at us all. We've come back into our homes. We're setting up home offices. We're being careful with our money. I think also like we're looking at our friends and our family, and we're looking at what the fuck really matters.
Yeah, a lot of shit really doesn't matter.
You know, and so I think that a lot of structures of being dismantled, and these what I see as the more positive, smaller pockets and independent groups are kind of coming up in this situation.
Yeah, most definitely, and it's really exciting, man, because I've noticed that, and I think honestly it's a lot of laziness as well. You know, it's one thing to have a concept, and then it's one thing to execute the concept.
Yeah.
And I understand where people are coming from, because sometimes getting the idea and the effort it just takes for you to get there. People see, like, you know, people see Culture Machine and say, oh, this is great. You know, everything's there. But they don't understand how much effort it takes to get to that point. It's like that everything looking great is like 5%.
Yeah.
It's like literally 5% of all the work that's been put in. So, you know, and I've seen a lot of my friends in the creative sphere. Like, I've noticed, I think now more than ever, I'm noticing a lot of people starting to like imitate what they're doing, which is great, because you know, you want to inspire people. Totally. You know what I mean? If people are looking at Culture Machine and someone wants to make something that's similar, it's like, you look, that's great, because you're inspiring people. Yeah. But look, when you're copying something from like from the blueprint, like you got the complete branding guide. Yeah, that's when it's like, you know, you gotta chill. But you know what?
That's when you know it's going to fail. Because there's no intention. If you're trying to copy a blueprint of what someone else has done, you're never, ever going to be that person, and you're never, ever going to create what they created. So if that's your motivation, it's just not going to work. Yeah. Your motivation has to be finding your own way. And there's nothing wrong with being inspired. I was inspired by so many different companies when it came to Culture Machine. You know, one of the companies I was most inspired by was Dazed and Confused, and what Rankin did with that, and like how multifaceted that is. And I always wanted to kind of have this thing that had all these different branches coming out of it. So yeah, I was inspired by that, but then it was like, make it your own, make it your story, make it your context, make it your community. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I draw inspiration from so many different things all the time. Yeah. But then always trying to come back to who am I and what am I trying to say? And because the thing for me, it's like, if I make something and it doesn't feel right, I get this really gross feeling.
Yeah. And you know, it's a feeling that, you know, okay, I'm corny.
I'm corny, I'm forcing something, or again, like I can't breathe because it feels like clashing, you know?
Exactly, you know.
But not to say that, you know, obviously there is a commercial element to what I do, and I do need to make money, and you know, the cost of running what I do is pretty high, and that means having to work with commercial companies and maybe people that. Structures that I don't necessarily agree with, but basically like this idea of like working within a structure, knowing you can change it. Yeah. I think when people sort of put you down for, because I'm also very hyper aware of being a hypocrite. Yeah. Like I think that's why. Sometimes I haven't tried to necessarily align myself with one particular cause, for example, because I know that I'm inherently flawed. And when it comes to the work that I do, at some point I'm going to fuck up, or at some point I'm going to work with a company that's not completely sustainable, or I'm going to work with a company that doesn't, you know, do enough diversity in their casting. In that process, I will try my best to try and influence them in a more positive direction. But I also know that I don't always have that power. But the more of a profile that I get and the more trust that Culture Machine gets, the more we will have that power.
It takes time.
It takes time, and it takes navigating an existing system and an existing structure in order to change it. So it's kind of like going back to, you know, when I was at uni and I did a photography elective. And my tutor said, you know, you've got to learn the rules before you can break the rules. Yeah. And sometimes I feel like that's kind of how you have to go about business. You've got to learn the rules and the existing structure, and you've got to respect the people who are at the top because they made their way there somehow. If you want to make a change, that's fine, but learn the rules first, and then you can break them.
Then you can do what you need to do. Well, I sort of saw that, especially breaking the rules. I like I know you did a project with Microsoft. And you look, I'm a sucker for people who make their own content, especially video content. I love that shit. Yeah. I love small films. Yeah. I'm a big fan of videographers, and I think there's a lot of really exciting videographers coming from Australia. Yeah. So when I watched that, you know, I really liked the way that Microsoft, you know, had that project, you know, and were really trying to encourage that. So can you Can you explain that a little bit and what the sort of the concept was and sort of what came out of that?
Totally. So that was really exciting. And this is where, segueing a little bit back to I get really kind of pissed off when people attack me for being an influencer. Although they don't necessarily attack me. That's the wrong word. Yeah. Sort of devalue my presence or devalue what it is that I do by just slapping me with a label. Oh, you're an influencer. You just take selfies. Yeah. No, I don't. I do so much more than that. And the reason why I created an influencer platform was to reel in contracts. I knew that companies were going to influencers and they were giving them budget. And I was like, if I can act as an influencer and get that budget, I can put that into my team and fund my production company.
Yeah, it's smart.
That money that you were paying me for that sponsored post, I'm putting that into my company. I'm paying my I couldn't pay people because there was never enough money. But I'm hiring gear and we're bringing a film crew together and we're getting a composer on board. That's where I'm putting the money. So that's where Microsoft came from. So as an influencer, I was invited to a dinner with Microsoft and Bianca was there, who is the illustrator, lots of different Sydney creatives. And I was very impressed with the PR company for actually going out of their way to find people who do things. Because so many times I go to influencer events and not to discredit any of those people, but it was just like, give me some variety. Give me some people who are doing shit. I want to know what you're actually doing.
Yeah, what's tangible? What's really tangible? Give me your
show me your skills.
What is this? Yeah, just show me.
So I'm sitting at this dinner, and then at the end of it, they've announced we're doing something we've never done before. We're giving $10,000 away as a creative grant to someone in this room who can pitch us an idea within 48 hours. And essentially, it was a very open brief. It said anything but ordinary. Show us how you can use Microsoft technology to create something anything but ordinary. Send us a pitch and how you want to do it, and then the winner will get $10,000 and you'll get to do that with your team or whoever you want to do it with. And so I've sat down and I've gone, fuck, I really want to make films, and this is the perfect kind of opportunity to fund a film because films cost a shit ton of money, especially when you're hiring dollies and units. And I mean, for that film, we shot at night. Across 2 nights, we had to have a unit and a generator because there was no power at night. And of course, I wanted it to be at night, which means shit tons of lights. So I knew that the 10K was going all into the production side of things. Anyway, so I did the pitch, I sent it off, and then I got the email back and it was like, you've won the pitch. Go and do what you got to do. And then Microsoft just came and filmed like behind the scenes of it because they were more interested in showcasing how an artist can use their technology than they were about me making an ad for Microsoft. And I said right from the beginning, I was like, do I have creative freedom with what I make? And they were like, absolutely. The only one thing we want you to do is somehow integrate the technology into what you're doing and show us how you're using the technology. So I had like the Surface Pro and I was using it for pre-prod and we were using it on set. And I now have the Microsoft Studio, which is at my studio. So as a tech company, I was really impressed with them by understanding their consumer, understanding that we're filmmakers and photographers and illustrators that are using their technology to use Photoshop and to use Lightroom and all of this sort of stuff. And then being like, but creative freedom. Here's some money to make something. So I decided that I wanted to make a film, but I also knew that they wanted some tractions on social media because obviously I was like, everyone here has a platform. So clearly Microsoft's bargain out of this is some marketing. So I've gone, all right, how do I utilize Instagram in a way that's different? So I was very interested in the idea of like a community effort in creating a film and this idea of sort of like choose your own adventure, but more like poll-based. So I released it as 3 separate films, like 3 one-minute segments, and then I asked the audience to vote on Instagram poll what happens next. So when we did all our pre-production, we had to schedule in that we'd shoot 2 different versions of each scene. And then it was a fairly closed narrative, so I kind of knew that there were so many variables and either way we'd still be able to make it work. But for example, like in scene number 1, I'm in a diner. And then my phone rings and then I ask the audience, do I pick it up or do I not? Do I leave? So we filmed both of those versions, which meant that it was like a lot of extra filming that we weren't going to use, but I just knew it was going to kind of translate to the audience. And it worked so well. So I also had to use myself as the 3 characters.
So you could only, that was a part of the talent?
Well, because I didn't have budget to pay talent.
Yeah, so
I was just like, I'll just be me and I'll just wear a wig. And then I found this girl who had wigs and she was styling wigs. So we had like a team of 30 and it was so amazing seeing how enthusiastic people were to volunteer their time to be a part of something, to be a part of a film crew and a part of a team and to see a final product. And a lot of the people that I met on Microsoft are people that I continue to work with now. Like the composers who made the whole soundscape for the film are incredible. There are a couple called To Kill a Dead Man, and I just said to them, like, I want dark, brooding, Lynchian, creepy shit. Give it to me. And they just did the most incredible soundtrack. I
like that, yeah.
They made it from scratch. Like, they play all the instruments. And I've worked with them ever since, and I've contracted them on Schwarzkopf and multiple jobs where I've been able to pay them for original compositions. So whenever Culture Machine does a job like Bailey Nelson, all the commercial jobs we've done, I always budget into it money for our composers.
Because, you know, a lot of people watching, they probably don't even know $10K for a video production. And you know what's crazy though? Because dealing with, like, you know, the videographer, people don't see him, but his name's Cam. He's the one behind the thing. You know, and dealing with, you know, Steven, who helps produce the show. Yeah. They're the ones who actually put me on, you know, what actually happens behind the scenes. I think when I first started this podcast, I was sort of just on the video side. Yeah. And then now starting to understand how much it actually takes for you to create a video, how long it takes for you to write a storyline. And then now you might have to get a lighting person, now you might have to get makeup, now you might have to get sound.
Oh, but even within camera, right? So you've got your cinematographer, you've got your focus puller, you've got your gaffer, you've got your, you know, like all of these things. And then if you've got a dolly, you've got someone that's good, and then you need a best boy. And then it's like
it's
all
so
of
much,
these, you know, and like luckily because I studied film at uni, I sort of understand to an extent what a film set's like, and we're a very small team. But money starts going quickly. And these cameras aren't, they're not cheap. And then it's like, oh, the moment you say we're doing it at night, you got to hire lights.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
it's a different ball game.
And then I wanted a Steadicam, so I had to hire a Steadicam operator. And it's just like, if you're using a Steadicam, then you have to be careful about the lights, because when he's moving, then the light's going to get in shot. So like,
there's a lot of things that comes into it, and also a lot of things. One thing that I also noticed is that a lot of people think that shit is free.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? And my whole thing is that, man, I want to pay everyone, man. I don't care what sort of impact or what you actually produce. If you somehow have an input, I like to pay people. Because I understand this shit ain't free. Like paying, everyone's got to pay the bills. And at some point, if you're an artist, you will just appreciate people paying you for the time that you put in, because they might be on set for about 30 minutes. They might be but like that 30 minutes took them 6 years to get to that point of having that sort of skill and that sort of experience. So I totally
I mean, my
feel
whole
that.
thing was like, Microsoft 10K went into production. Same with the music videos we've done. You know, 5K for a music video is the max we'll ever get. That money, you know, goes straight
away.
Half of it's going to camera,
exactly,
and then the other half of it's going to production and catering and all of these things as well, location. So I'm working for free a lot as a director and as a producer, and so is the cinematographer, and so is the production designer, and so is the makeup artist and the stylist. So a lot of us, we're coming together and we're working for free, like our time and our labor for free, because we know that money's going into production, and we wouldn't be able to make the things we want to make without that equipment. So yeah, 10K sounds like a lot of money until you understand the film world and you understand how much it all is.
And it's good because I've also seen you working with a lot of different talents and a lot of different people from different fields, and I think that's exactly what we need. I think there's a lot of industry right now that, for example, don't have that access to, for example, as many videographers as possible. They look at you and it's very far away from what they are, but they don't realize that sometimes it's just bridging the gap, and sometimes it's just having a conversation with people and coming together. But Look, I want to thank you for your time. You know, it's been an hour.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
wow.
so we've been talking for an hour. So look, thank you. You know, I really appreciate your time, and
it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. Easy.